All right, everyone, thank you for tuning into Honest Defense. Today, I am excited and honored to have comedian Lou Perez as my guest. Lou was the head writer and producer of the comedy channel We the Internet TV. He now hosts the Lou Perez Podcast, in addition to producing sketch comedy, stand-up, and opinion writing. I first came across Lou way back in 2009 with his YouTube sketch, Wolverine's Claws Suck, which was some of the best work on the early days of YouTube. It still holds up. I just watched it the other day, in preparation for this. I still love it. Lou, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, man. And it's so wild knowing that you have seen my work all the way back in 2009. That's incredible. Thank you for that.
Well, that Wolverine skit, I mean, it has like 20 million views, which it's still a lot today, but even back then, I mean, just having a couple million was huge. I mean, you must have gone. Did you get a lot of attention from that?
Oh yeah. That's like the. I had a talk with a friend, and I said, look, if when I pass away, if the only thing that I'm remembered for is Wolverine's Claws Suck, I'm like, you know what? I'm happy with that legacy. I'm okay with it, because on YouTube, in addition to having millions and millions of views, it's also been dubbed in other languages.
Wow! So
there's a version that also has a ton of hits that's in Russian. I think there's a Chinese version. There's like Spanish ones. So it's pretty wild, and it's so long ago. Where I mean, I was so much younger, and I looked very different, like different haircut. My face was chubby. Chubbier. So oh, thanks, man. I wish that I sort of looked, either I looked the same way I did back then, or I looked the way I do now back then. So people would be like, oh, dude, Wolverine, would recognize me. But,
it's funny. I was reading some of the comments when I was watching it the other day, and people were like, yeah, I first saw this when I was 9, and now I'm 20. And they were like, back then I thought that they were actually killing each other. Like, it looked so realistic. How did you guys get that done as far as the special effects? Because again, this was 2009. Like, you guys, it looked like an X-Men movie the way you guys had the effects work in there.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for the effects work, but that goes directly with Paul Rondeau, who at the time, Greg and I were doing live sketch comedy at like the UCB theater, and occasionally like shooting sketches. And so we weren't, professional or seasoned on the production front. And, we had this just great opportunity to work with this guy, Paul Rondeau, who even back then, he was, we're kind of like the same age, was very professional, super hardworking. And when this idea came up, he was like, yeah, well, I'll see what I can do. So he, if I'm getting this right, Paul drew in those blades coming in and out frame by frame by frame. So I don't know what program he used, but I just imagine he kind of like put himself into an editing cave, just darkness, and he was just with working on the Wolverine stuff. And it's an amazing compliment too, to hear people saying, oh my God, these look better than they do in the movie. Because I think at some point there was like a garbage Wolverine, sequel that came out, where people were like, oh, this sucks. But, being able to point to that. And then also, like you're saying, like, people coming back to rewatch that video, 10 or 11 years later, that's a trip. Sure.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize how much goes into that kind of editing. I did a little video editing back in my day, and even just to put like a black censor bar when you have to go frame by frame by frame, it's a tedious job. So I hope people appreciate that. I want everyone to go check out that video. Pause this right now. Go check out Wolverine's Claws Suck, because it really is. It's a funny video and really well done. How did you first get into comedy? Because let me give you my theory first, and you can debunk this if you want. I'll be mad at you because this is my life's work, is this theory. But I think a lot of people assume that comedians started off as class clowns. That they were the ones always making people laugh as kids, and just kind of graduated into that as a career. Comedians that I know and that I've talked to and that I've heard talk about this almost all say, no, I was kind of a weirdo loner as a kid. I was kind of an outcast. And performing on stage kind of was their outlet to get some attention. They weren't the class clowns. The class clowns were the ones who were popular and had friends and were well adjusted, and so were able to kind of move into a well adjusted normal life after that. It's the comedians who were the outcasts and weren't very well adjusted that then kind of sought out that attention.
Well, yeah, I wonder if I might, in my case, I might be like half debunking that.
Okay.
Because I was a class clown who did well academically. So it's sort of like when it came to being in class, I was very focused on getting my work done. But outside of class, I was always, clowning around and making my friends laugh. I did have an awkward, I think, self-imposed outsider phase where I was in middle school, and there are a few pictures floating around in my parents' home of what I looked like in middle school. So just imagine me, my hair longer, like down to here. But I used to do the undercut where I would buzz it like all the way up here, like all the way around. So it was sort of like I just had like hair from here that like fell down. So I have like wavy hair naturally. So I'd have this weird.
Sounds like a Jim Carrey character. I'm trying to think of what movie that is, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess imagine, what was it, like Ace Ventura?
Yeah, Ace Ventura maybe, yeah.
Where he had the hair up. Now, just imagine it like shaved to the skin all the way around it. I think Jason Newsted, he's the former bassist for Metallica. He had a similar cut, but his was much longer. So I have like naturally wavy hair, so it didn't fall right. It kind of like came up, and it was just awkward looking. I had thick ass glasses that I'm basically blind, so my glasses have always been thick, like these thick Coke bottle glasses, braces with my, just teeth that just needed to be straightened. And then I haven't always been able to grow facial hair, and you're talking about like a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy. So I had what I guess you could just describe as a crustache, just like right above my lip, just like a little black caterpillar, right? And I used to wear a trench coat. This is before trench coats got the Columbine treatment,
right.
So let's be fair. I used to wear a trench coat, and I don't know if you also do an audio version of this. If so, my apologies to the people who are just listening in, but in order to make myself, I guess, be a weirdo, I would walk with my hands together like this. So just imagine like the two devil horns that you give, like if you're into metal, and then so do that with both your hands, and then put the middle fingers together, and then the thumbs together, and then connect all the fingers, and just walk around. And it's like, well, why are you doing that, Lou? Well, whatever. I'm just
right.
I'm in my mode. So yeah, it was a weird. I was a weird outsider, insider. I was also a jock too. So here I was, academic. I was funny. I was doing well academically. I played ice hockey. So yeah, I had my toes in, I guess, all different sort of like cliques and whatnot.
How did you start? When did you say, okay, I want to pursue comedy full time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that happened when I was in college. So I went to NYU, and I was basically an English major. And one year, I basically said, I've always what that's about. And I saw a flyer for an improv team or group that was being put together, and they were called. I don't know if they had a name at the time, but it ended up being like Camp Anawana Swim Team. So if anybody is a little
older, your shorts.
Yeah, exactly. So we get the reference. That's our generation.
Oh no, I'm older now is what you're saying. I hate that.
You're an old soul. You're an old
right.
soul. So I try. I went, and I'd never had any experience doing it whatsoever. And I guess I did pretty well, like the first one or two times I went, and then I missed like another time. And Ben, this guy who was running it, contacted me and was like, "Hey, do you want to be in the group? Because you didn't show up, and just wondering." So it was like, oh, he actually saw something in me as far as the improv thing. So started doing improv, and then that led to doing sketch comedy. And I never really wanted to do sketches, I perform them. And the reason why is just out of laziness. I didn't want to memorize lines.
Right.
And to this day, I'm still garbage at memorizing lines. It can be a nightmare working with me, just me forgetting lines. So I didn't want to, I didn't feel like memorizing them. So at first I was, I had like bit parts and in sketches. And then when I started like kind of really writing my own stuff and having bigger roles, I was like, wait a minute, I really like this. So, I was like, okay, I want to do that. And then we made the move to UCB theater. And from there it was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
And you got into stand-up too. And so I'm curious about that, because when I started doing some comedy, I realized that there's this division between improv and stand-up. Like the improv people view the stand-up people as being like cynical, too cool for school types, and the stand-up people view improv as being like the nerdy theater nerds. Did you find that, like, was that an issue when you started doing a little bit of both, or was it just you just kind of pursued what you were interested in pursuing?
Well, I didn't start stand-up until I think the first time I tried it. I think I was like 27 or 28.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So I had already had some years of performing improv and sketch under my belt, and they are definitely different worlds as far as how people come to it. So with improv and with sketch, you're a part of a team, and if you don't play sports, then that's your sports team, so there's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of definitely being more upbeat, positive energy, getting that going, like, yeah, cool, all right. And anybody who's, watched enough improv, sometimes it seems like the group performing is having a much better time than the audience watching.
Right.
So that's something that you get to lean on other people. You get to back each other up and all that. So I'd always been just petrified of doing stand up, just being up there alone, kind of naked without, anybody else to rely on. But when I decided that I like it as well, and I want to pursue this, one thing that I tried to do was, kind of treat even open mics like they were shows, and kind of bring performance energy to it. And one of the best things I would say to anyone out there who's looking to do stand up, or for one, people always ask, well, how do you get into it? Well, you just got to go and do it. You just got to sign up for an open mic. If you need a few beers to make it happen, then do it. See how you feel. If it's the worst thing you've ever done, hey, maybe not do it or try it again later. But if you really do want to pursue it, one thing I would recommend is either starting your own mic or starting your own show and hosting. It's a way to make sure you're getting time, and then also another way to make sure you're meeting people, comedians, even comedians who are, headliners, or I would say people who travel around and are, make their living doing comedy. Even they're looking for time, to try out material. So it's an interesting world. So when I started hosting mics and shows, I wouldn't host it the way that another open mic host would, a lot of times like down energy, like, hey, what's up? What's happening? Like not really prepared,
right,
and all that. I would treat it like a show, especially if on the off chance that a real person would be in the audience. And that happens occasionally. You're at an open mic and you're like, whoa, here's a couple that just wandered in off the street. Let's give them our attention. Let's make them feel like they actually came to a professional show. So, so there was something, there was something there. I've never, my interactions with other people, I'm more, I guess, extroverted, in that sense, or at least able to carry on a conversation. I'm not I do have my moments of gloom, but I try not to, push that onto other people, especially strangers who are waiting to go do 3 minutes right after I do my 3 minutes.
It's funny that you said you felt more naked doing stand-up than doing improv, because I feel the opposite. I feel like stand-up, at least, I know what I'm going to say. I know it's going to be 3 minutes. And so worst case scenario is I totally bomb for those 3 minutes. I get off stage and I'm done. with improv, it's like you get up on that stage, you have no idea what you're going to say. You have a rough idea usually of how long it's going to last, but there's no certainty to that. So I always felt like, oh, you're work without a net completely with improv. I don't know. Maybe that's just a personality thing.
Well, maybe but I think I think there's definitely an element there too, and there's something also where if things aren't going well in improv, like it's kind of like 9 souls are dying on stage, and you might not be able to pick any of that up. Where if you're doing stand up and things aren't working out, you can call it out. You can be like, oh, that sucked, huh? Or, make an excuse or something like that. And you have a chance possibly to get the crowd back on your side.
What have you been doing this past year? You're in New York, which has been one of the most locked down places in the world. What have you been doing to kind of maintain your comedy? I know you put out some sketches. You put out the Woke Godzilla sketch, which was hilarious. You just did that a couple of weeks ago. Again, the effects on that were incredible. So have you been also performing it? Like, have you done any? I did one Zoom show kind of early in the pandemic, and I just thought this isn't it, and I stopped with that. But what have you been doing during the pandemic?
I've been raising a child with my wife. So we had our son at the height of the pandemic. I keep calling it the height. I don't know if it's technically the height, but it was in March, and it was at a time when it seemed like nobody knew what the hell was going on. It seemed like people were just dropping like flies. So it was definitely a scary time to have a baby, and then and a lot of people were telling us, well, you were going to be kind of quarantined anyway, So it kind of worked out, the timing. And it's like, yeah, but, under normal circumstances, like the grandparents would be able to come over, friends would be able to come over, so it was very much just me, my wife, and our son, and trying to figure out what the hell we're doing. Right. But fortunately for me, my wife was excellent in that department. And so that's been that was a huge thing that happened in our life. And I haven't done stand up in over a year. So it was, I think sometime in March was the last time I did stand up, and it was a mic. It was an open mic. And so I hadn't done it in over a year. And last night I did it for the first time in basically 13 months. Wow. And fortunately, a buddy of mine, because I had put the word out to friends of mine, like, hey, if there's anything happening, please hit me up. So I got the call yesterday from my friend Harry. Said, yeah, there's a spot in this place called Dillon's Forest Hills, and would you like to come up and do it? And I said, yeah. And I was kind of like super nervous because I haven't been up there, man, in so long. And I told the host, Christine, she was great. I said, yeah, I haven't been up in a year. And she kind of gave me a look like, because there's real people there. Yeah. It's like, it's a real audience. I haven't been up in a year. I'm happy to say it went really well. Like it felt good to be up there. I was definitely rusty, but it was, I think the audience had a really, obviously played a really big role in that. Now with it seems like there's like a novelty to stand-up comedy, to live performance, where it very much felt like comedians are hungry to get up there and get out there again, and audiences are hungry to have that live experience again. So it was a lot of fun, and I'm happy I did it, and I'm just looking forward to doing more stuff.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I think audiences are probably more forgiving now than they've ever been, just because they're happy just to be out and be there and be with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are parts of it. It's odd. It seems like we are kind of, it's a reminder of the times that we're in where, you have audiences and they're at tables and they're eating, so they're not wearing masks, but there's like protective shields right in between them, so there was kind of, it could have been like a Blade Runner sort of, post-apocalyptic dystopian nightclub. Right. But no, and let me just say, Dillon's is fantastic. It's just that element of, sure, the separation.
Sure. Well, even, here, Helium's the main club, and we've been open since I think June. And what they've been doing is they take everyone's temperature coming in, and they just spread people out so the tables aren't as close together. It's maybe 60% capacity, and it's different. It's not as fun as when everyone's in there together. You have 300 people in there all laughing at the same time, but it's better than nothing, and it's just good to be able to be at the club and be performing.
Yeah, and there's I never did a Zoom show.
Yeah.
That was something, I guess, I don't even know how I would do that. I just, wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for me. I don't think I don't think it really works for any comedian, but there are comedians who are able to handle it a lot better and do it,
Well, I think the guys who do sketches like you and, Tim Dillon and Ryan Long, I think those are the guys, Andrew Schultz, like those are the guys who did better during the pandemic because that translates a lot better to just watching online. I think trying to do stand-up over Zoom, I think you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Like it just doesn't translate as well as just doing sketches does.
Yeah, or even just doing, pre-recorded monologues.
Yeah.
Where there's they don't have to be too flashy, but the timing is there the way that you want it to be. Where I feel like doing a Zoom, in my mind, I would be like, are people really watching? And then also, is there a delay? Are they getting it? Did they hear, is this thing on? Like it would literally be, is this thing on?
Yeah. How much have you felt the shift in politics when it comes to comedy? Have when all of the cancel culture stuff and comparing today to say 2009, do you feel that when you're performing that there's a difference in what the audience expects or what's considered over the line?
Well, last night was great. Not only to be able to perform, but also as an audience member, because I got to watch the other comedians, and they were great. And it was cool because I wasn't able to pick out what their politics were based on what they were talking about. And you had comedians making fun of Trump, making fun of Cuomo, making fun of the vaccine, talking about being a mom and being a dad, all that. And it was tough you couldn't pick out like, oh, I bet that you're a conservative or anything like that.
Right.
And I feel like when it comes to people are always the people that I know and I like. They're a lot more complex than the labels that are put on them. And I was speaking to one of the comedians afterward, and he was talking about just sort of the state of things, in particular politics. The idea being, look, I just want to make jokes, and I don't want to have to choose what my political leanings are in order for me to tell a joke. And I said, well, no, I'm totally with you there. The problem is other people will make that choice for you. And I had a run-in with that. I've had a run-in with that quite a bit, but it sort of really came to a head when last year I wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal called "How I Became a Far Right Radical," and there was an academic. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say you, along with Brett Weinstein and Sam Harris, weren't they all? They were all included.
Oh
in
yeah,
that
Joe.
list.
Joe Rogan and Blogging Heads TV. Yeah, so apparently there was a study a bunch of academics put together, and these are academics from colleges I could not get into, like Harvard and University of Pennsylvania, and they put together this study of YouTube videos trying to figure out these right-wing echo chambers, and they had all these classifications for all these channels, and I was put, or to be more specific, We the Internet TV, which was a channel on YouTube, was put in the far right category, along with Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan. And the obvious thing, you had to call that out. You're like, wait, you think Brett Weinstein is far right? And so I wrote a piece rebutting it, but then also talking about the much larger implications here. Where, I'm a comedian. I had lost my job working for We the Internet in October, and I'm looking for work. I'm looking for gigs. And for anyone who knows We the Internet TV, like my mug is all over it. I was the head writer, producer, the face of this thing. So if you're saying that this is a far right channel, you're saying that I'm a far right comedian or whatever the hell that means. And it's pretty astounding just how quickly somebody's, career opportunities can kind of go up in smoke. Because, I mean, I have no idea how many people read that paper or will read, the final paper that comes out if they're doing, rewrites on it. And I think they're supposed to do make some changes to it. I haven't heard anything or seen anything. But yeah, it's a funky place to be in when it comes to the political realm.
And that's what's so frustrating is that 99% of people would not consider you anywhere near far right. None of your audience. I'm sure you've never had a problem at a show when it comes to that, but you get one person who's at the New York Times or just has some sort of clout in that world. They can write an article, and now all of a sudden you're branded as that. So now any future article that comes out can be, Lou Perez, who is described as being far right, and it's gotten to the point. I saw that there's an article about kind of how the far right is dominating comedy, and they were talking about Dave Smith, who's a New York comedian, a libertarian, whose family, he had family that was killed in the Holocaust. He's Jewish, but he was labeled in this article as being a Nazi sympathizer. That was a direct quote, and it was in, I think, the New Republic. It was in like a major website, and now all of a sudden that's just out there, and that's. And my question is, do you see, is there going to be a realignment in terms of, are people just going to stop listening to this stuff? Because it feels like the more people I talk to who even aren't political, they're more and more realizing, the New York Times and CNN and all these places that they used to trust as being sources of facts aren't that. And so my hope is that at least, the clout that they have just subsides. And so now if they do label you as far right, it's just, okay, whatever, that's whatever they're saying. Mm-hmm. Do you see it going in that direction? Do you think people are just kind of just going to start ignoring that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, as down and doom and gloom as your mind can take, you can imagine just, oh my God, it's going to get worse and worse. I think, these institutions that we look to for truth are really showing who they are, and they're, bullshit artists, and they're, lying about people. And, when it comes to comedy, it's like, man, when did the Nazis get so talented and funny? Because it seems like everybody you're calling a Nazi comedian is someone that makes me laugh.
Right.
Or someone who I know, I could have a conversation with and disagree with, and they're not going to try to, get me fired, right. So I think, I think more and more, I forget if it was, I think a friend of mine, Chrissy Mayer, she pointed out where it's just basically going to come to the point where, people who are funny are going to have shows, are going to have podcasts, are going to make videos, and people are going to go watch them. And people who aren't funny or, want to, I don't know, share their trauma, I mean, you could share your trauma. Okay.
It's just, it's a separate thing. It's not comedy.
It's a separate thing. Or, right. People, and there's going to be, comedy where for people, I'm a fucking, libertarian as well. You're going to call me a fascist, and then people are going to be like, that doesn't make sense in any way. Like that formula just, the equation doesn't check out whatsoever. So I think people are definitely, opening up to it.
Yeah. I was curious, you describe yourself as libertarian. I wanted to get into that. How did you come to that as being your sort of worldview or philosophy?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure, I have a pretty bad memory. So I'm trying to like.
You remember that hairstyle pretty well.
Oh yeah, because that's my trauma. I carry that.
That'll be your next hour show.
Yeah, very deeply. I think. I think it sort of started with. I kind of got big into the skeptics movement back when Christopher Hitchens was alive. So Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, those are kind of like the two big ones for me. And from there, I was a fan of Penn and Teller. So there was the show Bullshit. And it was sort of the idea of, skepticism, being willing to question things, being willing to ask for evidence, and really, sort of saying that there are no sacred cows. And in the case of Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris, sacred cows were holy cows, and being able to, question faith and question religion. And the way that I put it, if you're able to question God, if that's not off limits, well, then nothing is off limits. So let me then, sort of take that way of looking at the world and observing the world, and also a willingness to be proven wrong, and go and check that out. And let me put that into different aspects of life. So it's not just what's happening in science. It's also, well, what's happening with government, what's happening with policy, what's happening, with interpersonal, activities and that sort of thing. And then I think it's sort of, slowly kind of moved me over there. And then in graduate school, I have a great friend, Carla, who was an anarchist. And she was making she was in the midst kind of like arguments with a number of other of our peers. And she was saying things that I'd never heard before. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And I don't know if I agree with it, but it's making me think, it's really making me think about this stuff. So ever since then, I've been, it's all been downhill.
Can that be taught, that curiosity? Because it does feel like there's two types of people that when they're confronted with ideas like that, with something as crazy as anarchism, you can either say, that's just, okay, you're insane, you just want to burn the world down, all right, whatever. Or you can say, oh, that's interesting, I hadn't heard that before, tell me more about that. Can that be taught, or are you just born that way? Because I've always been your way. I was always the latter. I always wanted to hear more about things. If someone says something crazy, I'm drawn to that. I like the crazy stuff. But I've always felt like I've been in a small minority of people who are like that, and I don't know if there's a way to change that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure either. It's sort of, like if somebody's born and they grow up to be like 6'5", you can't necessarily teach that.
Right.
It's like, how do we teach people to
Trust
be
me, I've tried to learn that. I'm 5'5". I would love to learn how to get a couple extra inches.
Well, I think something is, there might be something to kind of stamping out that curiosity early on. So I wonder how many people were curious, but then we're told, well, no, you can't go there. And I think we're seeing a similar thing with, sort of the chilling effect that, if you want to call it, cancel culture is having, where, obviously the people that make it into the newspapers are, either high profile cases of cancel culture. And sometimes they're not really cancel culture. It's like, big comedians saying that they're being canceled, but they're not. Right. But then you have that sort of trickle down into, people losing their regular jobs over insanity, or people losing their jobs for tweets that they put out when they were 17. But you don't necessarily hear about the people who are just never going to speak out and never going to say what they actually feel, unless it comes up in, maybe a survey here or there. So yeah, it's when I think one of the important things is, I sort of look at it as the position that I am in, where, I've kind of gone all in on the comedy stuff. Like there's just a paper trail of me saying things that, you just really, you're not supposed to say. Right. And some jokes that just don't work, and they just sound more awful than humorous. So I'm going to keep doing this because it's kind of my thing, and it's who I am. It's a part of who I am. And I need to do it. And hopefully I'm just, I could, people can look and say like, oh, Lou's somebody that I trust and I can confide in, and hey, maybe I could, maybe it's okay to talk about this stuff, because at least I know that here's one guy who I could, confide in.
Yeah.
And I've actually had that on, like, I've literally had people reach out to me to say, I can't say this out loud. I can't say this publicly. Here's what I think about this thing. What do you think? So they're kind of coming to me sometimes as like their priest or their rabbi, and knowing that, I'm not going to turn around and try to use this against them.
Yeah. Well, Barry Weiss has been writing about this for forever. It's kind of these underground groups of people. She writes a lot about parents in schools and how these parents they feel like they can't speak out, so they form these kind of private, secret groups to talk about this crazy stuff that's going on in their schools because they can't talk about it openly. And that's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is exactly what you're saying. Is like I at least don't have kids. I don't have people relying on me, so that if someone does come for me and try to cancel me, it's at least no one else. I'm not responsible for anyone else. So I at least have that freedom that I can talk about this stuff, and hopefully I'm just one more voice that helps more people feel comfortable talking about these things. Because I've had the same thing. I've had people reach out to me, even with my small audience. I had a friend of mine who's in psychiatry, who's going to be a guest on the show, who I was really excited to talk to because he's just a really thoughtful guy. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of just the mental state of the country and what's been going on. I really wanted to get his thoughts on mental health. And he messaged me the other day, and he was like, "Man," he's like, "I'm sorry." He said, "I'd love to talk about this stuff," but he's like, "I just can't." He said,
Wow.
My department's just so far left, and it's gotten so woke." He goes, "I just don't even want to get near any territory that could get me in trouble." And he's my age. He's a young guy, just kind of starting off his career, just got an appointment at a college. And so I'm like, man, I absolutely get it. It's just sad that the world now misses out on those people who have really interesting things to say, really important things to say. Now the world doesn't get to hear those people say those things because they feel silenced.
Yeah. And that's very troubling, because you're talking about, mental health,
right?
The idea being you want to help people, you want to, and it's sort of like, according to the new rules and the new sacred cows and the things that are good thoughts and bad thoughts, well, how do you expect to help people, who need it? Yeah, I wonder if like a lot of this stuff, and I've heard quite a bit about parents at schools, complaining about the garbage that their kids are being taught, and being afraid to speak up about it. And these are often, very wealthy people who are paying a lot of money for their kids to be, educated. And, I often think, if you have fuck you money and you're not willing to say fuck you, it's like, man, what a waste.
Exactly.
What a waste.
I say that all the time.
It's like, dude, come on, man.
Yeah.
But, and I wonder if so much of this stuff is allowed to go, to happen because of a lack of legitimate conflict in our lives, with these screens. And I live so much of my life online. It's like 99.9% of these people I'm never going to run into. So it really doesn't matter what I say or what they say to me, in the sense of there's no face-to-face, basically you need to account for this. But so much can happen, online, careers getting destroyed and all that without real consequences. And I actually had a conversation on the last podcast I recorded with my friend Todd Seavey, who's an author, and he's a philosophy major. And I was talking about, I'm a libertarian, and my big thing is I'm against I'm in favor of the non-aggression principle, the idea that I'm not going to initiate force, and I want all interactions to be voluntary. And I believe in self-defense. I do not believe in initiating force. And I'm like, but man, I see a lot of people just openly lying others, destroying reputations, and ultimately, committing fraud, and, stopping quite a few people from, potentially getting jobs or moving forward with their life. You're talking about livelihoods here that are being destroyed. And I'm like, is that a case of, you talk a lot of shit, now you have to account for it, and with it, with an ass kicking. So I wonder if that might be what the world needs, is more people, basically having, to come face to face with the stuff that they're putting out there and get their asses kicked. Now I'm not calling for violence or anything like that, but I've been sort of living by this code ever since I was, a kid, where it's like, I'm not going to put anything out there that I wouldn't say to somebody's face.
Right.
And if I get something wrong, if I get a fact wrong, I'm going to feel really badly about it. And the idea of lying about somebody, that's just really gross to me. And I just can't imagine putting that out there.
I was just talking about this. I had Will Willis on my show the other day. He's a veteran. He hosted the Force and Fire TV show, and we were talking about where this kind of hypersensitivity comes from. Because I'm not an alpha male in any sense. I wasn't super athletic. Wasn't a big guy, but you grew up kind of, just, scruffing with other guys. You grew up making fun of other people and learning how to get made fun of. And that's kind of how you connected with people who were different than you. Is you built this level of rapport where you could kind of needle each other on different things. And I see it today where people are so sensitive about every little thing that you can't make fun of anyone who has any bit of difference from you. And I just wonder where that was learned, because it's people my age who I feel like probably grew up a lot like I did, who are doing this stuff, and I don't know where it got picked up.
Yeah, I think a good book to check out is the Coddling of the American Mind. You got it back there?
I have it back there somewhere. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Those are real books. Whoa!
It's not a green screen.
I think that's definitely an interesting read. It's funny if you're thinking like, oh, could it be as simple as helicopter parenting and people choosing safety over independence of kids, instead of practicing conflict resolution, they go and tell the superior to go take care of this, that sort of thing. And as a new parent, and we have another one on the way. It's something that I'm concerned about. Of how are we going to raise our kids, and what world are we letting them grow up in.
Does this time make it a little more exciting to do comedy? Like I heard Ari Shaffir, I think he said this a few times. He says comedy's dangerous again now. And
Son of a bitch!
Makes it fun. What?
No, I thought I had come up with that.
Maybe you did. Maybe he stole it from you.
There's no way Ari stole it from me.
I've been hearing him say that for a while now. Obviously you agree with that sentiment then.
I have Lionel Shriver, who's a novelist and a journalist. She was on my podcast some time back, and when she writes, she likes to feel dangerous. Like this is an area where you can feel dangerous. I'm not a fucking skateboarder. Right. I have no interest in skydiving. This is where I get to feel a little dangerous, and it is saying something that comedy feels dangerous. And it's sort of like they're going back to the idea of the sacred cows and questioning the sacred cows. It's like, well, what are the new sacred cows? What are you not allowed to talk about? Right? Okay, boom. Let me see how I can handle that comedically. Also, what are the new rules as far as, let me see how this logic checks out. I don't know. It sounds like bullshit to me. Well, let's call out the bullshit. And I think that there is something, there is something to that for sure.
That's such a great point, that it's your outlet. If you are someone who kind of is seeking some sort of thrill or adventure, I never joined the military. I'm not into skateboarding and skydiving, but this was my thing. I always liked talking, and so it makes sense that naturally that's where I found my thrill. It's like, okay, what can I say to kind of shake people up a little bit? And
also I'm always surprised when people talk about public speaking. Like that's one of the things that so many people are afraid of. I know guys who are fighters, who are mixed martial arts fighters, who would get into a cage and fight people, and they're like, "Oh man, I never get on stage. You're crazy."
Right.
What? And I'm like, "What? Come on, you take punches to the freaking
right." And you would never get in a cage and start hitting people.
Not if they're allowed to hit back. No way. I'm not fighting anyone who's allowed to hit me back, man.
Oh yeah, I would totally do a one-sided fight. Yeah, tie their hands behind their back and let me go at them. I'm all for that.
But it's something too where it's fun. It's fun feeling a little naughty. But I think the one thing that's sort of killing it, that can kill the buzz, is sort of depending on which platform you put it on. And for those of us, again, who put a lot of stuff online, how the algorithm or the quote unquote human, the human checker, what they're going to think about it. Yesterday, I had a joke that was deemed hate speech or symbols. Hate speech or symbols. I don't even know what the hell symbols means. Like are they talking about literal,
like a swastika?
Swastikas?
Right.
Like instead of like a smiley face, like that's your emoji, like a swastika. Right. So I might butcher it, but my joke is basically women of color are just as capable of being annoying as white women. If you don't think Karens can be diverse, you're racist. Right? That's hate speech? What? That's hate speech. On Instagram, apparently that is hate speech. And I didn't even want to, it was sort of one of these things that it's so lame. And I'm like, am I going to have to look up the hashtag Karen and just see all the racist garbage that comes out? Is this what my life is going to be like? But what about him? Or what about that? Or what about that? Or what about that? And, that's something where I can't stand, playing that tit for tat thing. Like, oh, you kicked this off, but what about this?
Yeah. Well, I got banned on Twitter for a while because I posted a quote from Fahrenheit 451, a book about book burning. And the quote was, I forget the exact quote, but it was, white people want to burn this book, colored people want to burn this book, let's burn them. And I put it in direct quotes. I said Fahrenheit 451. I had no other commentary for it, and Twitter banned me for hate speech. And I appealed it. I said, hey, this is just a quote from Fahrenheit 451. They rejected my appeal. They wouldn't let me back on Twitter until I deleted that tweet. So I deleted it and just reposted it, and I never got banned again, from that. But yeah, it's a weird world we're in. But
well, yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what makes it harder, or definitely more annoying, is depending on the platform. Like, let's take Facebook. I guess I've been on Facebook basically since the beginning, ever since there was a time where you had to be invited on. And a guy I went to NYU with named Shalom, he invited me on. So Shalom, thank you very much for inviting me on. All
Shalom to Shalom.
So this whole time I've invested, say 12 to 14 years into this platform, and things have changed rather recently, as far as how they're handling things, right? So what sucks is, if I get kicked off, all that material is gone. I think there's, I could download the stuff, but all those comments, all that stuff is gone. Whereas with Instagram, I'm really not that invested in it. If I get kicked off Instagram, okay, whatever. I have a bunch of other, other platforms. And I think that sort of makes it like just more, kind of more egregious, where it's like, come on, man, you're basically erasing, a part of a life lived here,
And I just last night, I was in a Clubhouse conversation that was hosted by some of the people at Reason Magazine, and they were talking about conservatives' critiques of big tech, and they were discounting. They were saying, conservatives shouldn't be so critical of big tech, and a lot of the arguments are what you would hear from a traditional libertarian argument, which is these are private companies, they can do what they want, you agree to their terms of service. But my argument is exactly what you said, which is, well, I agreed to use this platform based on my assumption that as long as I wasn't breaking some fundamental rules, I would be allowed to stay on this platform. And you have people who for years have built up brands and careers on these platforms, and now all of a sudden the rules are shifting on them and they're being removed. And that's I'm trying to, as a lawyer, I'm trying to approach this from the perspective of there seems to be some sort of contract breach here, some sort of breach of mutual assent, that if I'm using this platform under a certain assumption and that assumption proves to be wrong, or you change the rules that my assumption was based on without really giving me any sort of notification. I mean, they'll send an email saying we've updated our terms of service, but there was a question when the internet first got popular in the early 2000s of, are these terms of services, are they valid? Because, if you just click I accept without actually reading it, can you really say that that person agreed to those terms? And the courts in the early 2000s pretty much sided with, yes, those are valid contracts, but it was very highly debated for a long time about whether that actually was a valid contract. And my thinking is, why shouldn't we revisit those rulings? Because that's, to me, it's a libertarian solution, is to say, hey, they're violating the contract here, the agreement that I'm going to use your platform under the belief that you're not going to kick me off for arbitrary reasons, and they're kicking people off for arbitrary reasons. I'd like to see that idea explored more, because it doesn't seem like anyone's really getting into that idea.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this with quite a few people, and I don't think this is as cut and dry as, well, they're a private company, they can do whatever they want.
Right.
I think there's a lot more at stake there, especially when you talk about collusion, where when Trump was kicked off Twitter, and then he ended up being kicked off all these other platforms, and then you had Parler that was kicked off all the other platforms. And it's also, I'm interested to see what is the connection between these platforms and the state, in that what are rules that they're operating under that are protected by by the state, and would they be able to get away with a lot of this stuff if that protection wasn't
right.
there? Even something as intellectual property protections, patents and the like. So yeah, it's it's one of these things where I think what a lot of this stuff, and trying to find comedy in it, sometimes it's the comedy isn't necessarily in the policy as opposed to the way people respond to it, right? So you have a bunch of people who, they're so happy right now to say, well, it's a private company, they can do whatever they want to do. And these people saying it are only saying it because the people being screwed over are their enemies, right? But if Biden was thrown off of Twitter, and say Twitter said, hey, you know what, we don't like presidents that bomb other countries, we don't think that they should have a platform, right? I mean, there would be an uproar. There would totally be an uproar.
Yeah.
And so there's a thing with, I don't know, it could be tough to have a principled stance when your enemies are being screwed over.
Well, then that's what's so beautiful about comedy, is your principle is just, you're going to mock everything, and that's the great thing about it. And that's why there's people, I think, validly are concerned about where things are going and what the future of free speech looks like, but there are so many great comedians working right now. Yeah, I love your stuff. I love you mentioned Chrissy Mayer. She's hilarious.
Yeah,
the Legion of Skanks guys, Tim Dillon, Chris DiStefano, Andrew Schultz. I mean, I could keep going and going and going. There are so many great comedians out there. Are you optimistic as far as the future of comedy and the future of speech, just because of I think there's more talent now maybe than ever?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely optimistic about it. The gatekeepers are no longer, they're being knocked down. You can't fuck with Tim Dillon. Yeah. The guy, for one, I mean, the guy's fantastic. But he has an audience. He built his audience, and they're going to be with him wherever he goes, whether it's through his podcast, whether it's through his videos, whether it's seeing him live. And there are going to be people out there who are hungry for this type of comedy, right? Either because, hey, they might agree with the comedian, or they agree with him in principle, but more so just because they make them laugh.
Yeah,
they make them laugh. Everybody that you named, has made me laugh. And it's like, for me, that's the number one most important thing when it comes to comedy. And I think one of the problems that we had, like sort of, during the Trump administration, was this idea of, he was always portrayed as an existential threat.
Yeah.
Trump is an existential threat. And when something is an existential threat, not unlike, people talking about, climate change, right. The idea is we need to throw everything behind it. Everything needs to go to stop this existential threat, even comedy. Comedy needs to stop this existential threat. Right. And it turns out, it wasn't an existential threat. It turns out that the grand, dictator wasn't what you said he was. And in that time, what we ended up seeing was a lot of hack material, and a lot of people who sort of, have survived it. Yeah. A lot of clapter.
Yep.
And I think, like, the comedians that you listed, like, they survived it because they didn't lose, the comedic sensibility,
That's what frustrated me over the last couple of years was how many people you'd see it at open mic, you'd see it from a headliner, you'd see it from Netflix people. Like, you're telling supposed jokes that people aren't really laughing at. They're clapping along with it because they agree with it. And I just think, well, that's not comedy. That you're trying to get a reaction from people out of just saying something that they agree with, rather than what makes people laugh is when you say something that they don't expect, and you're doing the exact opposite of that. And that's, what's frustrating is, it feels like, okay, that's dying down now. Comedy's going back more to normal just because Trump's gone. Well, what's going to happen the next time there's a Republican in office? Is going to go back to the same thing that they're doing. And that's the obnoxious thing, is like when you can kind of see these cultural shifts up and down, and you kind of know what's going to come. And I'm just kind of already pre-annoyed for what's going to happen the next time.
Well, I think a big thing too has to do with who people trust, and trusting in institutions. And I think I'll put a lot of blame on Jon Stewart, not necessarily, not saying that he wanted this to happen, but people started looking to the Daily Show as news. They started looking to Jon Stewart as a quote unquote truth teller, and that, I think, is a dangerous thing when you're looking to comics for the truth,
right.
For the reporting. And obviously that's going to happen when the, respect and veneration breaks down of institutions. But then what's going to happen is then you have these institutions that are looking and saying, like, well, everybody likes Jon Stewart and respects him. And so why don't we try to be more like that? Why don't we try to be a little funnier, a little more entertaining, as opposed to, reporting what's actually going on and trying to give, an idea of what's really happening in the world.
Right. Or you see some of these comedians becoming the institutions, like Jimmy Kimmel. When I was a kid, I thought was the funniest guy on the entire planet. And now you see one of his monologues, and it just feels like he's reciting talking points from some of the big corporations and the federal government, and it's creepy in a sense.
Yeah. No, it's I don't get it. I just I don't understand it. I guess I'm not his target audience. I feel like he's cried so much on his show. He cried over Cecil the lion. You remember that?
Right.
It was years ago.
I do. Yeah.
Someone killed a lion, and he got really upset about it. And all I can think about is just like how many poor Africans that lion may have mauled.
Right.
Before taking a bullet.
So what's the future for Lou Perez? What are you working on now? Where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can find me. My website is thelouperez.com. I also have a community on Locals, thelouperez.locals.com. For those of you who don't know Locals, it's sort of a hybrid of Facebook and Patreon. So you can join the community. You can also support my work with a one-time donation or a monthly donation. I have the Lou Perez Podcast that I think I'm celebrating the 28th episode, something like that, today. 27th or 28th episode. Thank you. And I'm looking to do more live stuff, and I'm in talks about writing a book about comedy. And awesome. I can maybe I can put my 20 plus years of lived experience into a few words.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll be on the pre-order list for that. I'm excited about that.
Thanks, brother.
That'll be cool. Great. Well, Lou Perez, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I had a blast.